Okay, so picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at midnight, and you see some guy on the internet who started investing at 22, and now he's 32, and he's got like $400,000 sitting in an account. And your first thought isn't, that's awesome. Your first thought is, well, that's not going to be me. And then you close the app and you go to sleep feeling a little bit worse about your life than you did 5 minutes ago. Here's the thing. I used to feel exactly like that. Because when you're staring at your bank account and you've got maybe 200 bucks of breathing room at the end of the month, the idea of investing feels like a joke. It feels like something rich people do with money they don't need. It feels like a game for people who already won. And look, I get why you'd think that. Because every single finance guru online is showing you charts where somebody invests $500, $1,000, $2,000 a month. And yeah, sure, that person's going to be fine. But $200? That feels like a rounding error. That feels like it wouldn't even matter. So here's what nobody tells you. It's not the $200 that changes your life. It's what happens to your brain the moment you start doing it consistently. And that's what this video is actually about. Not the math, although we're going to get into the math and it's going to shock you, but the psychological flip that happens the second you become, even in a tiny way, an investor instead of just a spender. Let's start with the number, because I know you want it. If you invest $200 a month, every month, starting today, and you get a pretty conservative average return of about 8% a year, which is actually a bit below the long-run average of the S&P 500. After 30 years, you don't have $72,000, which is just what you put in. You have somewhere around $290,000, almost $300,000 from putting in less than what a lot of people spend on takeout and subscriptions every single month. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because that number is almost 4 times what you actually contributed. That's not a typo. That's not a best-case fantasy scenario. That's just what compound growth does when you give it enough time to work. Albert Einstein, or maybe it wasn't actually him, historians argue about that quote constantly, supposedly called compound interest the 8th wonder of the world. And whether or not he actually said it, the guy who did believe it was probably a genius, because most people never let it work long enough to see it. But here's where it gets interesting. And here's the part that actually matters for you right now. Today, not 30 years from now. The moment you set up that $200 automatic investment, something happens in your head. Researchers who study behavioral finance call it the endowment effect, combined with what's sometimes called commitment consistency. Basically, once you've made a small commitment toward a goal, your brain starts wanting to protect that commitment. You start seeing yourself differently. You stop being someone who's bad with money, and you start being someone who invests. And those are 2 completely different identities. And identity is what actually drives behavior, way more than willpower does. Think about it like this. If I told you, don't buy fast food for a month, you'd probably last about 4 days before you cracked. Because you're fighting your own habits with pure discipline. And discipline is like a muscle that gets tired. But if instead you tell yourself, I'm an investor now, I have money working for me every single month, suddenly skipping the extra DoorDash order isn't a sacrifice. It's protecting your future self. It's a completely different frame. You're not restricting, you're building. And your brain treats those 2 things in totally different ways. Here's a story that kind of proves this. There's research out of Fidelity, one of the biggest retirement account providers in the country, that looked at who their actual millionaire investors were. And you'd assume it's all doctors and lawyers and tech executives, right? People pulling in huge salaries. But a huge chunk of them were completely ordinary earners. Teachers, government employees, people who never made 6 figures in their life. What they all had in common wasn't a high income. It was time in the market and consistency. They started small, and they never stopped. Meanwhile, and this is the part that annoys me every time I think about it, the average American who has access to a 401k at work isn't even contributing enough to get their full employer match. That's literally free money sitting on the table, and people leave it there because $200 feels too small to bother with. It's not that they can't afford it. It's that their brain has decided it's not worth the effort for something that small. That's the actual tragedy here. Not that people don't have money. It's that they've written off small amounts as meaningless before compound growth ever gets a chance to prove them wrong. Let me give you a metaphor, because I think this is where it clicks for people. Imagine two farmers. Farmer A wants a full-grown, shade-giving oak tree in his yard as fast as possible. So he waits. He waits until he has enough money to buy a mature 30-foot tree from a nursery, which costs a fortune. So he just keeps waiting. Farmer B, on the other hand, plants a tiny acorn on day one. For the first few years, it looks like basically nothing happened. It's just a little stick in the ground. His neighbors probably laugh at it. But he waters it every single month. Doesn't matter what else is going on in his life. And 20 years later, guess whose yard has the massive oak tree providing shade for his whole family? It's not the guy who waited for the perfect moment with the perfect amount of money. It's the guy who planted something small and let time do what time does. Your $200 a month is the acorn. It looks like nothing right now. For the first year or two, honestly, it kind of is nothing. Your account balance is going to look almost embarrassingly small. And I want to be honest with you about that, because a lot of these videos lie to you about the early years. The first 2 years of investing $200 a month barely feel like progress. That's normal. That's not you failing. That's just how compound growth works. It's incredibly boring at the start and almost unbelievable at the end. Now let's talk about where this $200 should actually go, because I don't want to leave you with just inspiration and no action. For most people, the easiest and most boring, and boring is good here. Boring means it works without you having to think about it. Option is a low-cost, broad market index fund inside a retirement account. If your job offers a 401k with any kind of employer match, that's genuinely your first $200 before anywhere else, because that match is an instant, guaranteed return that you cannot get anywhere else in investing. If you don't have that option, a Roth IRA is usually the next move, because the money grows completely tax-free for the rest of your life, which sounds small now, but is genuinely one of the most powerful tools available to a regular person. Inside that account, you don't need to pick individual stocks. You don't need to time the market. You don't need to watch financial news every day. An S&P 500 index fund or a total market index fund gives you ownership in hundreds of the biggest companies in the country for a fee that's often less than 0.1% a year. And then, and this is the actual secret, there's no secret, this is it. You set it to automatic and you leave it alone. Because here's the brutal truth about why most people fail at this, and it's not what you think. It's not that they pick bad investments. It's that they check their account too often. They invest $200, the market drops 8% in a rough month. They panic, and they pull it out. And that single decision, made out of fear, undoes years of potential growth. The people who actually build wealth this way aren't smarter than you. They're just better at ignoring their own accounts. There's actually a somewhat famous, slightly darkly funny finding that one of the best performing investor groups Fidelity ever tracked internally were accounts belonging to people who had died. Because dead people don't panic sell. That's the whole lesson in one sentence. So if you take one thing from this video, let it be this. Stop waiting until you have enough to start. $200 a month isn't a small amount because compound growth doesn't care how big your first deposit was. It only cares how long you let it run. The version of you 10 years from now isn't going to care that you felt silly investing such a small amount. They're going to care that you started. Set up the automatic transfer today, right after you finish this video, before you talk yourself out of it, and then do something that feels almost impossible in a world built to make you check your phone every 5 minutes. Forget about it. Let it be boring. Let it grow quietly in the background of your life while you go live it. Because in 10 years, you're either going to have an oak tree, or you're still going to be waiting for the perfect moment to plant the acorn. And the only difference between those two futures is a decision you can make in the next 60 seconds. If this made investing click for you, hit subscribe, because I'm breaking down exactly this kind of thing every single week. And if you want to see what happens when you push that number past 200, comment down below.